Hey everyone. So it's been a while since I've updated you on my reading, and I've read a ton. Back in February I read 12 books, if you can believe that. So I'm super proud of that. Here is the list of my books. I kind of made it a little bookshelf in my journal. So the first book I kind of wanted to talk about was The Suffering. And The Suffering is by Rin Chupeco. And The Suffering is a sequel to The Girl and the Whale. And basically, it's a great continuation. It's a great sequel to The Girl and the Whale. It has horror, dark moments, dark imagery. Tark and Okiku and back up in the Aokigahara forest, and they try to overcome this curse, and they've kind of got to know each other better, and it's just a really great story. I enjoyed it. If you like Japanese lore and Japan and you enjoy horror, I would recommend this book to you. I give it 4 stars. Let's see. The other book that I read was If I Did It, and If I Did It is by O.J. Simpson. I gave it 4 stars as well. O.J. Simpson kind of sold this as his hypothetical confession, like if he did it. And there was a lot of turmoil that Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, families had to go through when he was writing this. And at first they had opposed it, but then they ended up taking his book and putting it out. So the family does support this book because it kind of gets that story out there, and it shows you what kind of horror Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman went through the eyes of O.J. Simpson. And I just really found it a disturbing tale, heartbreaking, horrifying, especially when it came to not only the actual murders, which in the book you can see how he tries to put his spin on it and make himself feel better about it, or how he kind of wanted to avoid doing that chapter at all. And then just that chapter was awful. And basically, he goes about talking about his dog and how his dog was howling after the murder had occurred, and how he tried to get out of town so that he had an alibi, and a whole bunch of things. But I thought it was an interesting read. Obviously, you have to take things with a grain of salt, because he was also trying to make himself kind of appear as a good guy throughout this book, and talking very negatively about Nicole and why he did what he did if he supposedly did it. But it was still an interesting read. Horrifying, disturbing, heartbreaking, for sure. I read the Voyager series, which is the 3rd book in the Outlander series. Extremely satisfying. Claire and Jamie have lived basically a lifetime without each other. Claire had her daughter, in the future, or her present, I guess you could say, and she's lived without him, and she just recently found out that he was still alive, and that she just wanted to get back to him because that was her, true love. And so we follow her back through the stones, and you get to see them reunite again, and it's just extremely satisfying. And they go on this other ordeal with his nephew, and 4 stars. I'm excited to see season 3 because Sam, that's all I have to say, right? But yeah, it was a good book. And then let me get my next set of notes. Then I read a bunch of or I listened to a bunch of Audible original stories, which were kind of shorts, because I needed a palate cleanser after that dense book That is The Voyager, the third book in the series of Outlander. So I read Islanders, and basically it was a reality show. It was based about a reality show, and it kind of read or had me feel like I was listening to a radio show, which I really do like those usually, but I gave it 1 star. I felt like it was a pointless story. The characters were unlikable and unrelatable, and they were just kind of awful to each other. So 1 star for that. I was hoping it would be better. It was called The Islanders, so if you see it, I would recommend staying away from it unless you're like really, really obsessed with reality shows. But honestly, I don't watch reality shows, but if it had a good story to it, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. Then I listened to The Pool House. The Pool House was, I want to say it was well written. The only issue that I had was the way it was written was almost like a fever dream. Like the character was going through something, but she wasn't exactly saying what she was going through, and you kind of had to read through the fog of what of what she was going through. And I feel like she was going through something that was traumatic and life-changing, but it didn't come out and say it. It just kind of gave you those yucky vibes, I guess I can say. And I just didn't fully understand it, and I know that a lot of other listeners have felt the same way, but I feel like this character went through something traumatic, and it's just her way of telling the story without reliving the trauma. She's kind of like covering it with the part that was okay in that moment or that day, if that makes sense. So basically it follows a girl and how she talks about going to this lady's house and seeing the lady's older daughter, and the lady's older daughter is kind of like this bad influence but cool to her. And one day she goes swimming and there's this strange figure watching her, and she goes upstairs in this pool house, and it kind of cuts away almost, but it also kind of gives a sort of feeling of fight or flight. I don't know how to explain it because it was really confusing, but it was still an interesting story. Because I didn't understand it, it was more of a 2-star read for me. So the next Audible original that I listened to was Hold Your Breath. And Hold Your Breath was about a woman who narrowly misses being murdered by a serial killer in her area. And it was just purely by chance and luck. And she's kind of trying to piece the ideas in the survivor's guilt together when she's meeting with her psychiatrist. Thought it was extremely interesting. I love the twist at the end. Short and satisfying. I ended up giving it 3 stars. And then I listened to a story called One of Those Flings, which I gave 4 stars, but it was kind of like a guilty pleasure read because I rarely read romance, I know it doesn't sound like that, but I mostly read horror and like mystery, but I've kind of gone out of my comfort zone this year, which I'm enjoying. But One of Those Flings, I think is what it was called, and it was about a woman who was celebrating her, I guess, year of being single, and she just wanted to keep being single. And she meets this guy who runs this business of taking tourists on different excursions, and they kind of get friendly, and it's just a cute little romance. Then I listened to the book In-Depth Market Research Interviews with Dead People, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Basically, it's about living while you're alive, and I really enjoyed it, but I would have loved a longer version of it. Basically, this woman, her car breaks down, and she's always been, I think, a Volvo driver, and it kind of asks the question, well, is that all you want to be, is a Volvo driver? Like, because they always get Volvos. Anytime they need a car, it's a Volvo. Her husband has a Volvo. So it's just kind of like this cycle. And it's basically about living while you are alive. And one day her neighbor helps her pick out or test drive a car. And I just really loved their character interaction. I would have loved a longer version of the story. I feel like it could have been really something special if it was a little bit longer. It was super short. Dolly by Susan Hill was a 4-star read. Basically, it was about a boy and how he went to his aunt's house, and at his aunt's house he met his cousin, who was a spoiled kind of girl, and she didn't appreciate anything. And one day her aunt decided to do something nice for her and get her something that she always wanted her mom to get her, which was a doll. And the little girl did not appreciate the doll. She immediately was like, this is ugly, how could you do this to me, how could you get this for me? And the doll kind of does some strange things throughout the story. Anyway, after the aunt passes away, the boy and the cousin meet up again as adults, and she hasn't changed very much, sadly. But there's some really like strange twists to it, horrifying imagery, and I just loved the mystery behind it. Like, I cannot recommend it enough. It's super short, and it was for free on Audible. But yeah, this story is basically about being appreciative, is what I'm going to say. But yeah, I don't want to spoil it because the twists were amazing, and that's what made it. Then I also read A Court of Silver Flames, and obviously this is my 5-star read of February, Sarah J. Maas. I love the plot. I love the new characters. I'm not going to get too much into it because there are so many different reviews of it, but essentially it was about Nesta Archeron, and basically she's trying to find her place in the Fae world, and she's struggling. I mean, she's very negative. I had a hard time liking her because, well, just because of how she was, very negative, very selfish, didn't really help Feyre when Feyre was hunting for, their food and their livelihood. She was very negative towards Feyre and her decisions. And this is kind of like her book to kind of like fit in and find her place in this new life that she has. Anyway, I really love the new characters that they introduced. I love that they talked about the Valkyrie and had Valkyrie moments. I don't want to spoil anything. And the best part was Cassian. He's just amazing. Absolutely adore him. One of my favorite characters. And really, he was what I was reading for. I wasn't reading for Nesta. I was reading for him. And I just really loved it. I loved him, I guess I should say. I liked the ending, or the last few chapters of the book. Very fast-paced. Reminded me of Hunger Games mixed with ACOTAR, if that makes sense. But yeah, loved it. Cassian is everything, and I'm excited for the new book in the series. I heard it might be 2 years in the making, which is very sad because I'm really loving the ACOTAR series. To fill the void, I decided to go to Throne of Glass. And basically it follows a young woman named Celaena Sardathian, and she basically was put into a camp where they have to do mining and hard labor, basically. Anyway, one day a prince named Dorian comes and gets her, and he wants her to be the champion for the king. And if she wins being the champion in the competition, she will win her freedom after a few years of service being an assassin. Great story, loved it. Loved the character development. She kind of reminds me of Nesta in a little ways, but I like her way more, if that makes sense. Of course, I had to read Crown of Midnight right after that. Crown of Midnight is the sequel. It really catches you by surprise what happens in the sequel. She starts, you know, living life in the way that she wants to, even though she still has to follow the king's rule. And there's a little bit of romance in there, but it's really not like the ACOTAR series. It doesn't really have a lot of spice, at least it hasn't yet. Yeah, I was definitely devastated by the ending of it, but I thought it was a good series. Anyway, I will probably do another wrap-up video for March. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys think of these books if you've read them, and I will see you guys later.